So then what does the Constitution have to say about who has the power to do what? So Trump announces tariffs. Great. Can he do that? Does anyone know? Is there a lawyer in the room? We're sorry, passengers. We don't mean to disturb you, but if there's a lawyer on the plane, could we have them report to your nearest flight attendant? We have a legal situation we need to resolve immediately. Let's look at the U.S. Constitution. I'm happy to say, it looks like the U.S. Constitution is still up on a website by the National Archives. They have not taken it down yet. So if you're not familiar with it, now's the time to be familiar with it. We have it broken into articles. Article 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Article 1 creates the legislature, creates the Congress, creates the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then they are given enumerated powers. The Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay debts, provide for the common defense and general welfare. All duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. To borrow money to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states and with the Indian tribes, or we would call them Native Americans. To establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws of bankruptcy, to coin money, to punish counterfeiting, to establish post offices and roads, to promote the progress of science and useful arts, by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. Sounds familiar if you are a viewer of this channel. To punish piracies, to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to declare war, to raise and support armies, to maintain a navy, to make the rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district as may become the seat of government, so the District of Columbia. Wasn't established as D.C. back then, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper, so the necessary and proper clause then, so they can make laws to carry out these powers. Now, you may have perked your ears up when I said they may have the power to collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to regulate commerce with the foreign nations. And you may remember that I said this was Article 1. This was the Congress, not the executive branch. The executive branch is the president, so Congress, not the president, has the power to regulate foreign commerce. Well, there is also an article in here about establishing an executive branch. That's Article 2. The executive power is vested in the president. Each state shall appoint electors to elect the president. The Congress determines the timing of the elections. Okay, none of this says anything about tariffs. By the way, he does solemnly swear, I will faithfully execute the office of the president and faithfully defend the Constitution of the United States. He's the commander-in-chief of the military. He has the power, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators concur. He shall nominate judges. He may appoint inferior offices. He may fill up vacancies. That's it. By the way, he can be removed on impeachment for treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. We should always keep that in mind. Where in here does it say he can impose tariffs on foreign trade? Article 3 is then judicial branch. Article 4 is full faith and credit, privileges and immunities, how you form new states, a guarantee of a Republican form of government. That's the representative form of government that we have, not the political party Republicans. Congress can propose amendments is Article 5. The validity of debts is Article 6, and Article 7 is ratification of the Constitution. So where in there does it say that the president has the power to impose tariffs on foreign trade? It does not. So really the president can only do this in coordination with Congress passing a law. But okay, for some reason we're imposing these tariffs. Like we, the United States, are imposing these tariffs. Okay, whatever. That's fine, right? Like that's just going to be fine, right? No, of course it's not going to be fine. There's a lawsuit. There's a lawsuit by the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Today, the New Civil Liberties Alliance, NCLA, filed the first complaint challenging President Donald Trump's unlawful attempt to require Americans to pay a heavy tariff on all products they import from China. President Trump imposed the tariff by invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Okay, so that's what he's done. This statute authorizes specific emergency actions like imposing sanctions or freezing assets to protect the United States from foreign threats. It does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. In its nearly 50-year history, no other president, even President Trump in his first term, has ever tried to use it to impose tariffs. This lawsuit does not quibble with President Trump's declaration of an opioid-related emergency, but it does take issue with his decision to impose tariffs in response, without the legal authority to do so. So here we go. Under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, Congress has the sole authority to control tariffs. The president cannot bypass these statutes by invoking emergency authority in another statute that does not mention tariffs. All right, so let's take a look at the lawsuit itself then. So we have Emily Lay Paper, Inc., doing business as Simplified against Donald Trump. This is a complaint for injunctive and declaratory relief. So we're going to declare the tariffs invalid, and we're going to impose the injunction of ordering people in government officials and such not to impose the tariffs. Plaintiff challenges President Trump's unlawful use of emergency power to impose a tariff on all imports from China in this case. So we're just challenging China in this lawsuit. The president ordered this tariff in an executive order February 1st and doubled it March 3rd. He issued these China-related executive orders as part of a set imposing across-the-board tariffs on our three largest trading partners, China, Canada, and Mexico. The president purported to order these tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, but that is a statute that authorizes presidents to order sanctions as a rapid response to international emergencies. It does not allow a president to impose tariffs on the American people. President Trump's executive orders are, therefore, ultra vires and unconstitutional. Ultra vires means outside of your power, outside of the power that was given to them. So, again, the Constitution gives very limited power to the President of the United States. Believe it or not, they are much closer to the CEO of a company or the chairman of the board. Not even the chairman of the board, though, because that would be crossing the separation of powers. The chairman of the board is maybe the Speaker of the House and the President pro temp of the Senate or something. Whoever leads Congress. The CEO, I guess, would be the executive that executes the board's or Congress's orders. It's Congress that issues orders in the form of laws. It's Congress that's responsible for legislating the will of the people. The president is not a king and does not do anything other than execute the laws within the power that they've been given to do so, within the money that they've been given to do so. They're required to pay the money they've been given to pay, etc. It's just an executive, and they're the person who makes the congressional law into a physical operation. That's it. It's not further than that. It's not a king. There's no throne. There's no magnificence about it, really, at all. But we've done that. We've given a big White House and an Oval Office, and everything looks very magnificent and respectful and everything, but not because they're a king, not because they can do whatever they want. And then I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here that we, the world, but especially half or most of America, are going along with this emperor has no clothes charade that President Trump has powers he doesn't have. So this is of course, like, duh. I mean, he doesn't have the power to do this. So why are we all going along with it? You may not know if you have not tried to buy something. So I I am addicted to camera equipment. If you haven't noticed, new microphone, not new microphone, but different microphone. I moved a camera around here. We've got a new view over here, a different angle. I bought a tripod last week. It was 400 euros. It's a very expensive tripod, a good Manfrotto carbon fiber tripod for both photo and video. It's a good one. The same tripod then, after I bought the last one that was in stock, I ordered it. I went back to the listing. It flipped over to it, comes from a different location. This time comes from the US. That tripod is now 688 euros coming from the US. And there is a little disclaimer underneath the price that says, I don't know whether this is an addition or what, but it says like 200 some euros of deposit for import and tax duties or something like that. You're going to see YouTube videos and articles and everything about people complaining about how their stuff is now much more expensive. And what are they going to do other than pass that price on to whoever they can? I'm fortunate that I'm fairly immune. I don't think there are any tariffs that apply to me. More so when I buy camera equipment, I have to be careful where it comes from now. It's going to affect some other people really, really, really badly. A tariff is a tax on Americans' commerce with other countries. And I cannot be more clear about this. When I order a piece of equipment or I order something that tariffs apply to, my government holds the item until I pay the tariff. So if I order a $100 item with a 34% tariff, they hold the item and I have to pay the $34 tariff and often a minor $5 or $20 processing fee for having to process it that way. You're supposed to have paid that in advance and the paperwork's supposed to be in order so it just sails right through. So this is going to make a lot of things more expensive for people who really hadn't prepared for it. The number one example, of course, is the Nintendo Switch 2, which was going on US pre-order and it now is not because they have to reevaluate how much they're charging for the Nintendo Switch 2. It seems like they will still sell it on time. It will just be more expensive. Or not. We'll see what happens. Sometimes they Nintendo sometimes use the console as a loss leader. Presidents can impose tariffs only when Congress grants permission, which it has done in carefully drawn trade statutes. These statutes typically authorize tariffs only on industries or countries that meet specified criteria, and only under specified conditions after following specified procedures. Such statutes require advanced investigations, detailed fact-finding, and a close fit between the statutory authority and a tariff's scope. Not making fun or getting political here, but do you really see in your heart of heart, do you see this administration engaging in genuine fact-finding, attempting to observe and then obtain a truthful representation of something? I don't see it. I don't see them engaging in any of that. They're going to try to do what they want without following procedure and then complain about how the procedure is oppressive and judges are activist and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's coming at it from the opposite direction. It's not learning about the world and conforming yourself to reality. It's learning about yourself and then trying to conform reality to you. I'm not even sure if there's any learning about yourself involved there. It's just arrogantly trying to conform the world to you. It's very narcissistic and arrogant and selfish. President Trump is attempting to bypass these constraints by invoking the international emergency powers. The international emergency powers do not authorize tariffs. They do authorize asset freezes, trade embargoes, and economic sanctions. Congress passed the Economic Powers Act to counter external emergencies, not to grant presidents a blank check to write domestic economic policy. The real reason for the China tariff is to reduce American trade deficits while raising federal revenue. While the emergency is not challenged here, the fit of the tariffs to the declared emergency does not meet the requirements of the Emergency Powers Act. If the president is permitted to use emergency powers to bypass the statutory scheme for tariffs, the president will have nearly unlimited authority to commandeer Congress's power over tariffs. So the big question then is, will the courts allow the executive branch to order tariffs without legislative authority or will they find legislative authority in this Emergency Powers Act? There are 4 reasons. The executive orders are ultra vires, which is outside of your power, because the IEPA doesn't authorize a president to impose tariffs. Basic tools of statutory construction dictate this conclusion. The Supreme Court's major questions doctrine confirms it. The executive orders present a question of vast economic and political significance. The major questions doctrine requires the president to show that IEPA clearly authorizes him to impose tariffs. In other words, major questions are left to Congress. Political questions are left to Congress. Second, the China executive orders are ultra vires because the president has not and cannot meet the requirement that he show the tariffs are necessary to address the stated emergency of illegal opioids. Third, if the Economic Powers Act permits the executive orders, this statute then violates the non-delegation doctrine because it lacks an intelligible principle that constrains a president's authority. In other words, Congress cannot just give congressional authority to the president. Congress has to delegate that properly. If you were an employee and your boss gave you instructions to do his job today, I don't mean you have more information. I mean he literally says the words, "Do my job today," and nopes out. You probably wouldn't know how to do your job. So you might try. You might be like, okay, well, I know he has to do this and this and this, so I'm going to try to do those things. You might use ends justify the means. I need to make this happen, so I'm just going to do it any way I know how because I have to do my boss's job. When you give someone vague instructions, they're going to do whatever they want based on their motives. You know, maybe you are motivated to do a good job for your boss, but you're still going to try to do it however you can if you've not been trained properly. So Congress has to train the president. I don't mean they send him on a training course, but I do mean when they write a law, the law has to be specific enough and clear enough. And if it's going to delegate authority to the president to make a decision, it has to specify the conditions and criteria for that decision. It cannot just leave it open. It cannot just say the president is allowed to impose tariffs, period. That does not compute. That does not work under the U.S. Constitution. I'm stating this as a legal fact, and that is the basis of this as well. But it is a legal fact. The separation of powers and the U.S. president's inability to simply impose tariffs without a proper delegation of authority is a legal fact. The resulting modifications violate the Administrative Procedure Act because they are contrary to law. The resulting modifications to the HTSUS are therefore invalid. That's the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States. These trade statutes, the Trade Expansion Act, the Trade Act of 1974, the Customs Duties Title of the United States Code, Title 19. These statutes all require the executive branch to follow specific procedures before imposing a tariff. Section 301 of the Trade Act requires U.S. trade representatives to navigate a multi-step administrative process, publish a Federal Register request for public comment on the proposed tariffs, conduct a factual investigation into China's trade practices, conduct a public hearing on the matter, issue a detailed report. To meet the statutory requirements for a tariff, the report had to contain factual findings showing that China's trade practices did violate trade agreements. If the U.S. trade representative had not found facts establishing that conclusion, the statute would not have permitted the administration to impose tariffs. Performing the required procedures took more than 10 months. The procedures for steel and aluminum tariffs took 11 months, and the procedures for the washer and solar cell tariffs took 8 months. Hence, if you haven't noticed, I'm wearing a Bethlehem Steel hat. Bethlehem Steel very famously failed due to mismanagement, but my father was in steel at the time, and he was very, very sure that it was the lack of tariffs and the economic dumping of Japanese steel on American shores that killed his business. I think it was mismanagement. Back to our story. The president's authority under the IEPA. Instead of relying on customs duties laws, he turned to the War and National Defense section. When President Trump began his second term, he bypassed these tariff statutes. Instead of relying on the customs duties title, he turned to the War and National Defense section. A president is authorized to respond to a foreign threat by declaring a national emergency and ordering an economic response. The statute defines an emergency as an unusual and extraordinary threat which has its source outside the United States to the national security, foreign policy, or economy of the United States. After declaring a national emergency, a president can order a responsive action if it meets two requirements. The action must be included in the IEEPA's list of permissible actions, such as freezing assets and blocking international transactions. Second, the specific action must be necessary to address the specific declared emergency. Consistent with these limitations, presidents have cited the IEEPA to impose economic sanctions such as import bans and asset freezes. Typical targets of the sanctions have been foreign governments, foreign political parties, and terrorist organizations. In limited instances, presidents have cited the IEEPA against domestic targets, but those typically have been specific wrongdoers, such as persons who commit, threaten to commit, or support terrorism. President Trump has previously cited IEEPA not to impose tariffs. He froze the assets of the main Venezuelan state-owned oil company. Other presidents have used IEEPA to impose consequences on America's foes, not taxes on American citizens. Okay, so we are skipping ahead a little bit. So he imposed tariffs on Mexico, China, and Canada already in February. I think that was 20%, and now he's imposing another 34% on China. There's more executive orders, and I guess that's where we're coming to an end of the lawsuit. So count one is an excess of statutory authority. IEEPA does not authorize tariffs. We went over all of that. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Count two, again, ultra vires executive orders. The executive orders are not necessary to address the stated emergency. Count three, the IEEPA or the use of it violates the non-delegation doctrine, as in Congress has not properly delegated the authority to do this. And the modifications to the tariff rates violate the Administrative Procedure Act because they didn't follow the procedural requirements. So what are they looking for? They're looking for a declaratory judgment. The executive orders as to China, we're just focusing on China, not the rest of the world. They are unlawful and unconstitutional because they are ultra vires and not authorized by statute. The IEEPA, or the use of it, violates the Constitution by failing to provide an intelligible principle constraining the actions a president takes under the statute. Remember, it needs to have directions. It needs to come with instructions or constraints on how to use it. Then a declaratory judgment, the China executive orders are unlawful, and the tariff modifications are unlawful. Vacatur, or vacation of the tariff rates, holding them unlawful. Permanent injunction, preventing them from trying again, or from implementing these executive orders, and an award of costs and attorney's fees and other relief as a court may deem just and proper. That's the New Civil Liberties Alliance. Andrew Morris, John Vecchione, sorry, John, and Brian Gowdy. Very nice. I hope it's successful. Let's take a look, see if we can find the docket and what the status is, because I think this was just filed on the 3rd. That's Thursday. There's almost no way the judge held a hearing on Friday. Emily Lay paper versus Trump. So complaint, yeah, we don't have a temporary restraining order scheduled or a motion for injunctive relief. That's disappointing because wouldn't you want to stop the tariffs before they go into effect? I think they go into effect like tomorrow or Monday or something. How is this the first time I'm hearing that POTUS cannot unilaterally impose tariffs? The press over here has been far too complicit. Yeah, I know. Declaring tariffs like this and causing intentional chaos, flood the zone, as Steve Bannon says. This violates the social order of things. This violates the moral social contract that arguably rides above the U.S. Constitution. Even if the U.S. Constitution authorizes something, there is still a higher moral or ethical code. Some people use religion or use religious texts as that higher moral code. Donald Trump and his administration don't follow those rules. And I'm pretty sure that's why people who voted for him like him, is that he doesn't follow the rules. But there were really good reasons for those rules, just like there are really good reasons for separating the powers of government so that no one person wields enough authority to upend millions of lives through either physical or economic violence. And that's what this is. This is economic violence being visited upon the world because the American president is unhappy that he's not getting the attention he wants, or just has an attitude of burn it down before I go. Anyway, that's what I have to say about tariffs. Let me know what you think in the comments below.